My name's Dave, and in this video I'm going to talk about methods, right? Methods. So you've probably heard me say in these tutorials that a method just does something, right? A method just does something. So but more specifically, a method is a group of statements. It's a group of statements that together perform a task. They allow you to create a reusable block of code that you can call from other locations in your application. Every C# program has at least one class. We're going to talk about classes later. It has at least one class with a method named main. So to use a method, we have to first define the method. You have to tell C# what you want the method to do. So you have to define the method, right? And then we have to call the method or run the method, invoke the method. So we have to define the method, and then we have to, when we need it to run, we need to call the method wherever we need that method to run, right? So let's look at the general syntax for a method. This whole thing, we call this the method signature. We'll look at each one of these things. We call this the method signature, right? It's the method signature. So let's look at this first part, public. This is the fancy term for this is access modifier, right? Access modifier. And there are other access modifiers like private, you might expect, public, private. There are a couple more. I don't want you to be too concerned about this. In order to really understand what this is and why we need this, we've got to delve into object-oriented programming, and we're not there yet. So just know that public has the greatest visibility, right? And it needs to be there, right? Technically, it doesn't need to be there. It would default to private if it's not there. But let's just go ahead and put it in there. For now, just stick it in there. Know it's got to be there. And just ride with it, and just kind of trust me on it for now. So, but when we get to object-oriented programming, this access modifier will make a lot of sense to you. And a lot of times we use private and public and private are the two that you use the most, right? So we'll return to this when we get into object-oriented programs. So for right now, just know it's got to be there and just stick it in there. If you don't know which one to use, public or private, just use public for now. And again, when we get into object-oriented programming, OOP, then this will make more sense to you. So let's just keep writing for now. Okay, let's go to this next part. This is the return type. The return type. So a lot of times what you want a method to do is return something. You want it to do something and then return a result. You want it to do something and return a result. A simple example may be a calculator, right? You want to add two numbers together. You want the method to add two numbers together and then return a value, return the result, right? Return the answer. But you have to declare what type of data you want the method to return. What type of data is it going to be? An integer, a string, a boolean? Is it going to be a type in the .NET framework? Is it going to be a type that you created? Or you have to be specific. You have to declare what kind of data, what type of data, what data type, right? What type this method is going to return. And if it doesn't return anything, we just put void here. Void is the keyword that just means this method is just going to do something, but it ain't going to return nothing, right? So the return type just says it's just you have to declare what type of data the method is going to return. And we're going to see concrete examples of this right now, later I mean. But right now we're just looking at the general syntax. So the method name, this is the method name, right? This is the name of the method. And it's an identifier, just like we've been doing with variables. We name our variables, we give the variable an identifier, a name. Same here. And this follows the same rules. No spaces, can't start with a number, no special characters, stick with letters and numbers, and you could use underscores. The convention in C# is title case with methods. I believe some developers use camel case with private methods. I believe some people do that, but I think the common convention is just title case. I've just been using title case, whether the method's public or private. I use title case. So title case just means all words are capitalized. That's all it means. So all words are capitalized. So as you can see in this example, method is capitalized and name is capitalized. So that's the convention. You don't have to follow that. It's just a convention, right? And it's a good idea to follow the conventions, right? So and you want your method names to be descriptive. You want some general name for your method. You want it to tell you. You want to be able to look at that name and have it tell you what it does, right? If the method adds two numbers together, then you want to name your method something like, add two numbers or whatever. The more specific and descriptive, the better, right? So that's the method name. That's how you're going to reference this method. It's how you're going to call this method. You got to have some way to identify it, right? You got to have a label. You got a label on the box, sort of thing. You got to have a way to identify it, and this is how we do it with the method name. So let's keep moving, and note the parentheses. The parentheses here. All methods have parentheses. Repeat. All methods have parentheses. You got to have parentheses. You got to have the parentheses. The parentheses is the way that we pass values to the method. It's a way we pass values to the method. It's like our simple calculator. We want to add two numbers together. Well, we've got to somehow tell that method what numbers we want to add together, right? We got to pass the method those values. We got our numbers, what numbers we want to add. We got to pass the method our values. How do we do that? And we do that with we put them in these parentheses, right? So we put our values that we want to pass to the method in parentheses, and we have to have these parentheses whether we're passing it a value or not. So you always have to have these parentheses, right? Okay, so the parameter signature. The parameter is like it's a variable. It's like a variable, right? You can think of it, it's just, if you understand what a variable is, you pretty much already understand what a parameter is. Parameter is just a variable for the method, and it's when you pass a value to the method. You want to add two numbers together, right? And you're passing your numbers to the method, the add method. They have to go somewhere. The method has to have some place to put it. You got to have a box to put it somewhere, and that's what a parameter does. So a parameter is when you pass a value to a method, it goes into the parameter. It goes into the parameter box, right? We can call them input parameters. Generally, we just call them parameters. We can think of it as input parameters. Input parameters, right? It's when you pass a value to a method, when you give it that input, it goes into the parameter box, we can say, right? Again, we'll see concrete examples. I know this is just general syntax right now. We're going to see a lot of concrete examples. So note the curly brackets. This method this is the method's code block. This is the method's code block, right? Open and close curly bracket, and everything within those curly brackets, everything between those two curly brackets, there's open and close curly bracket. This is the method's code block. This is what these are the statements. This is the block of code that will execute whenever you call the method, right? Okay, so I have a form app like we've done before. If you're not sure how to create a form app, just view the video on how to create a form app, right? I named mine methods 1. This is part 1, so I named it methods 1. You name yours whatever you like. I went to Solution Explorer, double clicked on this form 1. This opened up, and I went to Toolbox, and I look for the button. I just left click, drag a button over here, or you can double click, either way. So I just left click, drag button over here. Same thing with the label. Just dragged it over here, so I have one button, one label. And you can also right click and go to properties, or press F4, either way, and you see the properties grid will pop up here. And the only thing I changed was the text. I just changed it. I went to the text property in the properties grid. This is for the button, right? Properties grid. This is for the button. Have the button selected, just like we've seen before. This is a text property, and I just changed the text here. That's the text that goes that displays on the button, right? So I have one label and I have one button, right? And like we've done before, just double click on this button, and that sets up this click event, right? And all that means is that when you click on that button, it's going to execute this code. And by the way, this is a method, right? This is a method. It's technically we call it an event handler. You could call it an event handler method, right? But it's a method. It's a method. We got the access modifier. It doesn't return a value, so we have void. This is its name, right? And this is its parameter signature. This is a method, right? It's just specifically it's an event handler. It's handling the event, right? So okay, so let's go ahead and before we define a method, I want to go ahead and use a method that we've used before. This is in the .NET class library. This is message box, right? I just typed in MESS, and IntelliSense popped up with these this list here. So I'm going to select message box. I'm using my up and down arrows. Message box is selected. I can see it's selected because it's highlighted yellow. And you can see here it gives me the description over here. I know some of it's off the screen. But once it's selected, just hit enter, and there you go. And this has a static member, and that may not make any sense right now. But when we get to object oriented, that'll make sense eventually. So we have this static method called show, and this is a method, and it's a method. So I need what? I need the parentheses. Got to have these parentheses. And again, the purple box thingy here that indicates a method. It's a method, right? So show is the method I want. You got to have these parentheses, and note that this pops up, this window here when I type in the opening parentheses. This gives you a description, and also note that there are 21 different variations, a lot of different variations to this method. We call these overloads, and we're going to look at overloads later on. So we've got this this particular variation takes one string. We see here, this is the parameter signature, string text. Text is just the name, it's just what they decided to name the parameters. It's just an identifier or name. But string, well, you have to declare the type, and we'll see that in a minute. So this version, this variation of the method, this overload of the method, takes one string. And we can use up and down arrows, and we can see there are other variations of this. This one takes two strings, so it has two parameters. But we're just going to stick with this one. This takes a string, so this tells you what kind of data this method takes. It takes a string, right? And the text is just the name of the parameter. It's just the name, right? They could have named it anything. So this takes a string, so I'm going to give it a string, right? So hi, my name is Dave, right? So I'm just going to give it this string. I'm going to pass it this string, and let's go ahead and run this. Alright, so I'm just going to click on the button, and when I click on the button, it's going to execute this code. And there we go. Hi, my name is Dave. So that's all that this message box.show does. And this is just something, in the .NET. This is a type in the .NET framework that the good people at Microsoft were kind enough to write for us. Right? There's a bunch of types, a bunch of stuff they've done for us. So we could do this ourselves, but it would take a lot of code to create our own message box and all that. So here we can do it just one line because Microsoft has already done that for us, right? So it's a type. Message box is a type in the .NET framework. So And this is all it does. It just creates this little dialog box, this message box, what have you, and prints a string on it, right? So that's all it does. So we've called a method in the .NET framework. So now let's create our own method. Let's define our own method. Okay, so let's define our own method. And I'm going to click to the right of this closing bracket, right? This the opening bracket, closing bracket. I want to click to the right and just hit enter. So just click to the right of that closing bracket and hit enter. And you want to make sure that you're in between the namespace curly brackets and the class curly brackets, right? So I know that's a common thing that can trip you up. So the namespace up here, it has its opening curly bracket, closing curly bracket. This class, I know we haven't talked about classes, but class has its opening curly bracket and closing curly bracket. Then each one of these methods has its own open curly bracket and closing curly bracket. So you want to be careful here. Make sure you're in between these two. So just click to the right here, press enter, and so we want to go below. Want to be below this method or this event handler. So I'm going to type in. I'm just going to do public. Private would be fine here. But we'll just do public. And this method is not going to return anything. It's not going to return a value. So I'm just going to use void, right? Introduce yourself. And this has no parameters. I'm not passing it a value, so I just leave this empty, but I still have to have the parentheses. You always have to have the parentheses, whether you're going to pass it a value or not. So what I'm going to do is just cut and paste, just highlight this whole line, and I use Control X. You can right click and cut. Control X is the shortcut, so Control X, and then Control V. V is in volleyball. V is paste, right? So Control X, Control V. So I just cut and paste and just put that line here. So this is going to do exactly the same thing, right? Exactly the same thing, but we're going to do it in a more roundabout sort of way. We're going to call a method. So we're going to call this method, and this method is going to execute. And by the way, you have to add the semicolon. It's a statement. This is a statement. So you see the red squiggly if I don't have the semicolon, so I have to add that semicolon. And they have to have these parentheses, right? So this is how we call the method. So I'm calling the method, and I'm using the name of the method, my identifier, and I have the parentheses, whether I'm passing it a value or not. I have to have those parentheses. And I'm not passing it a value in this case, so I just have an empty set of parentheses. And you have to have the semicolon, right? So here we're calling this method, where we're calling this method. All right. And wrong one. Okay, so this is calling this method. There we go. So here I'm calling this method, right? And I'm using the name of the method and the parentheses, right? So this just says execute. When I call this method, it says execute whatever's in this code block, whatever's between these curly brackets. Do whatever's in between these curly brackets. That's what I want you to do, right? Execute that. So execute this code block. In this case, it's only one statement. We can have as many statements as we need, but in this case, just one statement. So it's going to execute that one statement. If we had 10 statements, it would execute all 10 statements. So whatever's between these curly brackets, whatever's in this code block, it's going to execute, right? That's what when we call the method, that's what we're saying. We're saying execute this code block. Execute this code block, right? So let's take a look at this. And I'm just going to run this. And click the button, and there we go. Exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. So let's close it. Let's look at this in the debugger now. I want to set a breaking point. You can also press F9. Just select the line and press F9. Or you can click over here, either way. and just let's go ahead and run this and click the button. Okay, so it's running what's in this click event, this code block here, so it's stopped here. All right, this is where my breaking point is, so it's stopped here. So I want to what I want to do is step into this method. So we've been using this we've been using this step over when we're debugging, but this time I want to use the step into. I want to use the step into because I want to step into this method. I want to step into this method. If I click on step over, then it's just going to execute that method. It just says execute that method, you know, or call that method and just run it. But what the step into does is steps into the method. Steps into the method. So let's see that. Let's click on step into. So I'm going to step into. You can also press F11. That's your shortcut. So I'm going to step into this method. And see how it stepped into the method, right? So that's what that step into does. We step into the method. Now I can do step over or either one. So then click on step over. And here it's on this line, hasn't executed it yet. So we see it, we've stepped into this method. Let's keep going, and now it's going to execute whatever's in that code block, just that one statement, and there you go. And that's what that does. That message box just throws up this dialog. So there you go. We've defined a method, and we've called the method, right? We've defined a method, and we've called the method. Okay, so that worked pretty well, but the problem is that it's not very versatile. You know, it's always going to print the same thing. What if somebody else wants to use this and they've got a different name than Dave, right? Say their name's John or whatever, then you know it's going to print out Dave here. So this is a pretty static way. It's not a very dynamic way. So one of the things that makes methods very useful is that we can pass data to it. And the $10 word for this is parameterize. Parameterize a method, right? Parameters are how we pass data to a method. So we can add methods in these parentheses. We can give it a parameter signature, and the parameters again are just like boxes, like variables for the method, right? So let's go ahead and do this. Let's go ahead and add a parameter. And just like with variables, we have to declare the type. And the type can be, this is a built-in, you know, type string, of course. We could also use types in the .NET framework. We can use types that we define. We could create our own data types and use them, right? So we're just going to stick with a string for now. And so I'm going to declare that this parameter can only use and I'm still in debug. That's why we're getting the purple squiggly there. So just click on stop debugging, the stop button. Alright. So okay, so I'm creating this parameter signature. This is my parameter. This is the name of my parameter. This is how I'm going to identify that parameter. Right? Variable, parameter, same, you know, basically the same. But you have to declare what type of, just like with the variable, any variable, you have to declare the type. You have to declare the type of data that's going to go in there. So we're creating this box specifically for this method, and we have to, just like with the variable, we have to declare the type. And notice up here we're getting the red squiggly, right? We're getting the red squiggly. So it says no overload from method introduce yourself takes 0 arguments. An argument is what we pass to the method. So no overload, no version, no variation, no overload of this method takes 0 arguments. So we have to pass it something. We got to give it something. We got to give it a string. We've got to give it a string. And let's type in the opening parentheses. And you can see here, introduce yourself takes a string, right? And the name is just the name of the parameter. We can name that whatever we want. But we want to be descriptive, so the name makes sense, right? And it's a string type. That's it. We have to declare the type. So we have to pass this method a string. We've got to pass it a string, right? So let's go ahead and do that. Let's pass it a string. And I'll just type in my name. So there we go. So now we're passing it a string, and this is going to get dropped in this box, if you will. So let's go ahead and create a variable, and we'll call this greeting. And we've seen this before. So hi, my name is space. I want to give it a little space there. And now we're going to use the plus sign. What is the plus sign? In this case, we're dealing with strings. So it's the concatenation operator, right? We're joining string, we're super gluing strings together, right? So this is the concatenation. We're concatenating these two strings, right? Okay, so we're concatenating these two strings. This is a string. This is a little box, a parameter, that holds a string. So I know it's a string because it's been declared to hold a string. So I'm concatenating, I'm joining these two strings together, just like we've seen before, right? Okay, so this time instead of putting a literal string, I'm going to put my variable greeting, right? So this is a box, this is a variable that holds a string. So I'm going to put that in there instead. So it's going to look for that box, going to get that box and take out whatever's in there, right? And it's been declared as a string, so we know there's a string in the box, right? All right, so I'm just using the variable, putting the greeting in this. This is my argument, right? This is the value that I'm passing to this method, right? I want to pass this to this method, and of course we're using the parentheses here. So let's go ahead and run this. See what happens. Should be exactly the same thing. And there we go, exactly the same thing. So this is a little more dynamic way of doing it, right? It's a little more versatile. So now we can pass it any name. If you have a different name than mine, which you probably do, you can pass it your name, right? All right, so the way that we are able to pass values to a method is because of the input parameters, right? We parameterized our method, right? It's the $10 word, parameterize, which just means we've added some parameters, right? So we have parameters. Input parameters, typically we would call them parameters, but let's go with input parameters, make it clear what it is. You're giving it input, right? So the input parameters, they allow you to pass data to the method. They allow you to pass data to the method, right? And you can think of it, it's a variable for your method. It's a variable for your method, right? So this is our definition, if you will. This is a graphical representation of our method definition. The name is introduce yourself. In these parentheses, I have a box, right, that is declared as string only. I've declared this box as string only. You only put strings inside this box. Only put strings inside this box. I've labeled it. I've gave it a name. I put a label on this box, called it name, right? You could call it anything. You just called it name. That made sense to me since it's taken a name, right? Or I could have made this first name, right? And generally we use camel case with parameters, by the way. Which again, camel case, the first word is not capitalized, the rest of the words are capitalized. So, but I could have put first name if I wanted to, but I just put name here, that's fine. So it's taken a name, it's a descriptive identifier, right? So this box, this parameter, can only hold a string, so we have to pass it a string, which is what I'm doing here. So this is okay. So here I'm calling the method, right? Calling the method. I'm using the method name. Using the method name. So I'm calling the method or invoking the method, calling the method, running the method, and all this does is says execute that method. Just execute that block, that code block, right? But here I'm passing it a value. I'm passing it a value, right? So the value that I pass to the method, we call that the argument, right? That's the argument. That's the value that you pass to the method. And this is what I'm passing to. It's a string literal. It could be a variable. It could be a box that holds a string. In this case, I'm just passing it a string literal. And the method only takes a string. So you have to give it, the parameter's been declared to only take a string, to only hold a string. So I've declared that box, a parameter, to only hold a string. So I'm passing it a string, right? So the value that we pass to the method, we call that the argument. This is the argument, right? And so this is, I pass this value, this string literal in this case, this string, Dave, and when I pass it to the method, it gets dropped into this box, right? This box, this parameter box, input parameter, that I've named Dave. I'm sorry, I've named it name, right? I've named it name, and that's my identifier. That's my first track. So this is my identifier for the parameters, what I call the parameter, right? Has been declared to take strings only. You only put a string in there, right? So this is my box called name, and here and this is what I'm passing to this method called show, which displays that message box, right? And this is the string that I'm passing to it, right? This is my input parameter box, if you will, parameter box, input parameter box, and this is, in this case, since I passed it the string Dave, that's what it holds, right? Whatever, if your name's Steve, you pass it the name Steve, and that's what it holds, right? Whatever it is. So I'm passing this method show my input parameter box, which in this case holds the string literal Dave, right? Okay, so let's go ahead. I'm going to click here and press F9, or you can click over here either way. So F9. I'm going to set up a breaking point right here. All right, so this is my breaking point, and let's go ahead and run this. Okay, let's go ahead and run this again. That's going to stop here. Now we have the string literal. Okay, so it stopped here, and again I want to do step into, not step over, step into. So we want to step into the method. I want to step into the method, right? Just like that, stepping into the method. So I want to step through the method, right? So now we can do step over, or either way actually. So this concatenates this literal string literal with this variable, right? Which holds okay, so we've concatenated these two strings and assign it to this variable called greeting, right? And I'm passing that variable to this method show, right? So you can see that has the value, hi, my name is Dave, right? So let's go ahead and execute that line, and there you go, same thing, hi, my name is Dave. So just kind of recap here. We've defined this method. Hopefully you're doing this with me. We've defined this method, right? Called introduce yourself. It has a public access modifier. We're not too worried about what that means right now. Just know it's got to be there and put it there, right? Void means this method is not returning anything. We're not returning a value with this method. We'll look at methods later. We'll actually return something, right? When we're not returning anything, we just put void there, the keyword void. The name of the method is introduce yourself, which is what I named it. I could have named it anything. It just made sense to me. We want to be descriptive. So introduce yourself, I'm using title case. All the words are capitalized. It's got to follow those naming rules. No spaces. They don't start with a number. No special characters. And I parameterized my method, right? I've given it a parameter, and a parameter is just like a box for the method, right? It's just like a variable. It's the same idea, but it's specifically for the method, and it's a box that holds a value that you pass to the method, right? So I'm passing this string to the method, right, and it goes into this box I called name, right? So this string literal could be a variable too, right? This goes into, when I pass it through these parentheses, it goes into this box, if you will, this parameter input parameter that I called name, right? So when I use the wrong one. So when I use the parameter here, my parameter box here, then it holds whatever string in this case that I pass to it, right? So now I'm concatenating these two strings together, and that gives me, hi, my name is Dave in this case. If you pass it another name like Bob, then it would say, hi, my name is Bob, or whatever. So and actually let's look at that real quick. Let's see, Bob, and let's go ahead and let's just run this. We won't step through it. Okay, and there you go. Hi, my name is Bob. So there you go. That's the introduction to. This is part one of methods, or other things to get talk about with methods. And I know this is a long one, so kudos for hanging in there. And I'll see you in part two.